We have prepared ourselves for this wonderful Congress weeks and months and the year before, but we had to face some some human experiences too. You have heard about the strike. For that reason, we don't have all the people here on board, and we had to adapt our program a little bit. But we are so happy that we will have an expert right here now. He's coming from the consulting side. He is connected with all the big companies, over 22 years already in this business, coming from Silicon Valley. It's Mr. Norm Rose. I will ask him to come on the stage in a minute. Before that, I would like you to answer a question with the chat, please, so that you find the right mindset. How is your attitude towards this artificial intelligence? It's a hype everywhere. Do you think it's justified in the travel industry also? Please, again, one answer each. First option, artificial intelligence will not fundamentally change the travel industry. Second, AI will fundamentally alter parts of the travel industry, so a little bit. And the rest thing is, will fundamentally change the entire travel industry. So please make your choice and find the right option. Do it now. So here we say, minority says no influence at all, 5%. Some say so-so, you're not really sure how much that will impact the travel industry, and third say yes, fundamentally. And you know, if you have a third of people who are really engaged in a topic, and they have the money in their hand, you can be sure that will have an impact on the whole industry, as we experience in the car riding and the autonomous driving industry at the moment. If even psychologists are replaced by artificial intelligence, then you can imagine how deep that might go into other parts of the industry as well. So I'm talking a little bit above the sea level. Now we have someone who's flying up to the stars and the moon. Now please come on stage and tell us something more about it. He's really the expert. I'm looking forward that you're here. You came through all the traffic jams. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't know about that psychologist having artificial intelligence. That sounds kind of scary to me. So we just did a little bit of a fast pitch over at the Phocuswright area, the innovation area, and every single one of the innovators said they use artificial intelligence. So it's becoming so common that I think a lot of people don't really know what it means. What does it mean, and if it's going to be, as we've said in this survey, at least impacting in some way the travel industry, how is it going to impact the travel industry? What is going to be replaced? Are we looking at humans losing their jobs because of artificial intelligence? Are we looking at enhanced experiences for travel, the actual travel experience changing? So let's talk a little bit about that. I like to always start, though, with kind of a perspective around technology change. Because at the heart of things is that technology is driving new business practices. And we began really in kind of the mid-90s. At that time, I was at a company called Sun Microsystems, which was a very early innovator. We used to talk about the World Wide Web, and I was able to send communication out to every Sun employee. That we're talking about late 1980s, early 1990s. So I understood what some of this technology was from that, and we had something happen in our industry. We had suddenly transparency. So the idea of what is behind that travel agency cryptic format desktop suddenly started coming to the surface via this transparency. Then we had the kind of the initial launch of social networks, Facebook, and then we had this combination of social, local, mobile, making it really important for everyone in our industry to understand where people are and what they are doing and how to help them. And we now have this period of this always connected traveler, right? In fact, I'm going to really judge how well I'm doing on this speech by saying how many people can stay off their cell phone. Okay. And where we're heading in a lot of buzzwords, and we'll talk about some of these buzzwords, but there is the idea of the Internet of Things, IoT, the idea of conversational commerce, sometimes in the form of chatbots, the idea of augmented and virtual reality. And then the main discussion today is about artificial intelligence. The thing that's very simply happening is that technology is becoming more mobile and smarter. Now, I just love this Gartner technology hype cycle. How many people have seen this before? It is great. It is the best thing to look at when you think about technology, and this is the best way to get away from this idea of hype versus reality. So what happens in this is that there's this really steep curve, and you get to the peak of inflated expectations. I can't wait for this to happen. And then you fall off the cliff, and you get into the trough of disillusionment. And then slowly, you go up this slope of enlightenment, and a plateau of productivity. And here's the actual hype cycle from 2016. And you look at this, and you see some familiar terms, and this feeling of, maybe some of this stuff is going to be real, some of this stuff is going to happen. And so what is at the top right now? We have cognitive expert advisors, machine learning, and software-defined security. Probably less around security, but certainly you've heard about these cognitive expert machines. You've heard about Watson now coming to the travel industry and is going to change everything. You've heard about machine learning probably quite a bit, and we'll kind of dive into that a little bit more. And then what's happened? Well, it falls off, and we see things like augmented reality and virtual reality, and things like virtual reality are now starting to get into an actual mode where they will have an impact on not only the travel industry, but society overall. And one of the reasons why we get this way are movies and science fiction books and TV shows, where we have either, hey, this is really cool, we're going to have robot assistants like in Star Wars or in Star Trek, or it's really scary. The Terminator is going to kill us, it's going to control the nuclear weapons, and we're really going to be done for it. So we get these different extremes, and it gets everyone excited, oh, we're going to be there. And then what doesn't also sometimes help is we have major players, people you respect, like Stephen Hawking, saying the development of full artificial intelligence could be the spell the end of the human, could spell the end of the human race. We all respect Dr. Hawking. We probably all respect, most of us, Elon Musk, the creator of Tesla and other SpaceX and so forth. He said we need to be super careful with AI because potentially it's more dangerous than nukes. And Bill Gates, I'm in the camp that is concerned about superintelligence. How many people are concerned about superintelligence? You're afraid? Get really afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. There is a difference between general AI and narrow AI. And we're in a mode right now of narrow AI, which means very simply that things are there to solve specific problems. So everyone's familiar with, IBM Watson was able to be programmed to win against human beings at Jeopardy. Or that Google was able to use their AlphaGo program and beat the master of the Go game, Lee Sedol. Or that if you're in my area and you're around Mountain View, you're going to see these self-driving cars. Those self-driving cars, they're going to put all those taxis out of business. This is very early stuff, and it's very narrow. The idea that you have human intelligence, actually superintelligence, is the term they use in computer science is the singularity. That we're going to be in this environment where the computer is so much smarter than the human that it's going to then threaten us. And that's really what Dr. Hawking and Elon Musk, I mean, that's what they're talking about. And we may see that. It may not be in my lifetime. It's probably 50, 60 years away. And so therefore, if you start thinking about, well, AI is going to eliminate my role as a travel agent, or eliminate my role as a tour operator, or change the way the hotels accommodations are being sold or they're experienced, it will to some extent, but not in the way that science fiction's been warning us. But why is there all this talk about AI? Why suddenly? I mean, I actually personally got involved with AI way back when I was with United Airlines. I had a friend who actually was the husband of one of my wife's bridesmaids. This was now 30 years ago, because I'm just celebrating my 30th wedding anniversary. And he was an AI scientist. He worked at a company which was an interesting name. It was called Mad Intelligence Systems. But we used to sit around and talk about expert systems. And I would say, well, how could they apply to the travel industry? And how could they emulate the best travel agent? And you wonder, well, that was back a long time ago. That was the late 80s. We were talking about AI. But why is AI so prevalent now? The most important reason is the fact that we are in this day and age just inundated with data. We're talking about, just in the last 2 years, several orders of magnitude. So we just have massive amounts of data, and it's very difficult to manage that. There's also more cloud computing. Almost every sector of various industries, not every sector of our industry, unfortunately, is using a S.A.S program, a software as a service program, sitting in the cloud. And that's also allowing a lot of information to be generated. And then there are open source technologies. This is something else we haven't done a very good job at in the travel industry. But if you went and you asked a data center manager, what's the operating system you run on your computers? You're going to find that a lot of them are running Linux. Linux was an open source operating system that basically was developed by the community. And that's happening with AI as well. There's been a lot of tools. There are people like Facebook who invest a lot in AI, who then open up facial recognition for other developers to build on. There's a whole open AI effort from Facebook and Google and others. And so that's why we hear so much of it. The other reason why it's important today is that we have structured and unstructured data. So structured data is easy to get at. You're able to understand, kind of, if you think of a spreadsheet like rows and columns, they each are in the right place and we know how to get that information. But we also have massive amount of unstructured data, and it's growing. And that can be emails or Word documents or social media. When you write a review and you say that this room was cozy, so what does cozy mean for an American, for a German, for a Japanese? It means something different to everyone. And so understanding the semantic context of a word that's in a review is already part of this ecosystem of artificial intelligence that we see all around us. And the idea of normalizing unstructured data is very essential. Now, mobile plays a role in this as well. I mean, there was a point in time, and Philip knows this, I was talking about mobile in the early 2000s, and I used to, how many people have a BlackBerry? How many? I don't do that anymore. Everyone has a smartphone. If you didn't have a smartphone, I don't think you'd be in this session talking about artificial intelligence. But it's created a different set of expectations from the traveler. They want things to be proactive. It used to be really funny. I loved getting messages about my flight is delayed and I'm on the flight. This type of disconnect with some information. But nowadays, it has to be proactive. It has to be relevant. Do I want to receive information? And if I'm searching for information, can I get the thing that I really need? It has to be timely, location sensitive. But the most important thing, it has to address the immediate need. it's kind of like, what's next? I'm on a journey. I'm a traveler. What's next? And that's what I want to know. And artificial intelligence is going to help get information, smart data to individuals. So let's talk a little bit about the different types of artificial intelligence. And this is, I'm sorry if this is like AI 101 for you, and if you're a scientist, forgive me, because this is very basic. But I thought it would be good to just kind of go through this so that you can have an idea when someone gives you a term like machine learning. We're using machine learning. What does it mean? And so we're going to review all these things, including kind of traditional things. Back in the 85, 86, I knew about neural networks back then. That's not a new concept. But the idea that you can have little computer programs kind of work together to act like neurons in your brain. And we'll talk about that in a moment. This term machine learning, which, guess what it means? It means that the machine can actually program itself based on certain variables. It doesn't mean it's intelligent. It means it can program itself. There's a big difference. There is kind of a sister way of using machine learning called deep learning. You hear a lot about that, and we'll talk about that as well. We'll talk about natural language processing, which is meant to kind of understand both text and voice. We'll talk about knowledge graphs, and one of our speakers, who unfortunately was ill today, has a knowledge graph in the travel industry. And we'll talk about what it means to have smart data, as well as what is all this buzz about chatbots. It is, in the Silicon Valley, it's getting to the point where you don't want to hear anything more about chatbots. There are just too many companies in this space. So let's start with neural networks. So basically, if you think of it, you have little computer applications, and they then kind of work together in a network. And it's trying to emulate some functions of the human brain. Again, it's not going to be creating the next Picasso painting. It's not going to create the next symphony, even though there are applications that do create music. They're not quite like the human brain, but they are inspired by the human brain, by biology. Now, recently, they've become a little bit more popular because of this other subject, which I'll touch on in a moment, called deep learning. But machine learning. So let's just kind of put this to bed. What is machine learning? We've heard about it. It represents a major step. Great, Norm. That's what everyone else says. But it, rather than rely on the computer, having the human do that programming, the computer learns. And the computer learns in a way by lots of data. The more data out there, that smarter machine will be. And that machine will also improve over time. And it's not just you individually with that application. It's actually everyone using the application. So think of this from a travel perspective. If you have a group of travelers, let's say you're a tour operator, and you have a group of travelers who are interacting with some application that they use, that application should get smarter based on the way that interaction is occurring. If you're a travel agent, say you're a corporate travel agent, and you have this need to kind of simplify the booking process for travelers, there could be this, well, here is what happens when your travelers go to this destination generally, and so the machine can learn about that. These are all real applications of machine learning within a travel context. So the more that app is used, the smarter it gets. So let's just dig down to one additional level, and this is courtesy of Google, so you understand this. Everything with machine learning starts with the first thing, which is examples. And these are humans feeding examples into the machine. So there's an example of some type of transaction. And there's an expected outcome. When this happens, this is what should be the response from the computer. Then the computer creates a model. It discovers patterns in the data and constructs mathematical models using different discovery techniques. So it's big surprise, there's math behind this. We should have paid more attention in school here. There's math behind machine learning and algorithms that are created. And then there are parameters, which are basically learning algorithms that develop sets of parameters to train the software to make decisions. So that happens, and the last step is the learner, which adjusts the parameters based on looking at different predictions. So when they get it wrong, machine learning gets it wrong, it then self-corrects the next time. So machine learning, actually, an application using machine learning can be pretty dumb. It's kind of a good example, even though it kind of falls into the voice category, is I used to always ask Siri, book me a flight. And I took my phone out. Luckily, it won't be triggered. Book me a flight to New York. And it would respond, here are some books on flights. You're not very smart, Siri. We'll talk about intelligent assistance on its own, but that's an example of something that now it says here are some flights. Now, that's partially because they probably have educated the machine. It may have because they've added some machine learning techniques in it, but hopefully that's clear to you now. So when someone says they've got an application that has machine learning, the first question you should ask is, where are you getting the data from? What data are you using? What is it learning? I can't tell you, again, just doing those fast pitch judging, each of them said, we use AI and machine learning. And my first question as a judge was, how? What information are you bringing in, and how does it learn, and what is it learning, and what's the change in the output? There has to be value to this stuff. It can't just be, techno-babble. We get into that mode. AI is going to change the world. Well, machine learning is going to revolutionize things. I even had a bullet like that, right? That doesn't make a difference. It's how it actually behaves and how it improves the experience. And then we have this subject of deep learning. Deep learning is really a cousin or a sister of the idea of machine learning. So deep learning is much more focused, and it's really trying to use the tools and techniques and apply them specifically to a certain subject. So recently, Gartner came out and said, unfortunately, deep learning is at the peak of inflated expectations. So it's a buzzword. But it should, pretty quickly this year, move to the edge into kind of a key component of analytics. So when you look at deep learning and you kind of consider what that is, the example I said before was hopefully you've heard of this, that there's a game called Go. It's a game that requires a certain amount of intuition as well as knowledge of moves. And the Google application beat the master. But the other one, which is really common now, is the facial recognition that was really developed by Facebook. And that is a deep learning. Now, the thing about deep learning, you go back to the Go example or the IBM Watson. Yeah, it can play Jeopardy, it can play Go. Doesn't mean it's going to be able to solve my medical problem. But there is probably a deep learning application that can now identify skin cancer. I heard about that last week when I was at an AI conference in the Valley. So these are very, very deep vertical types of things. So I wouldn't want you to get too far ahead of this, other than where's the deep learning example in the travel industry? And then we hear a lot about this. I remember going to a conference. It's got to be in the late 80s and 90s, and voice is the next thing. Voice is and they had this guy had a voice application, and he was saying, "Okay, let me demonstrate it." He talked into his phone, and then he put the phone on his chest, and he said something else, and the system kicked him out. Or you're in your car and you're giving it directions, and it doesn't understand you. So voice is nothing new. Voice has been around for a long time. Natural language processing has been around for a long time. It's just gotten much better. And Google is one of the players. Nuance is another player. There are big companies who just focus on this. And often what happens is smaller companies, even companies in the travel space, take that basic tool and then use the idea of adding taxonomy, which means the hierarchy of things, how things are related in a hierarchical sense, and ontology, which is the meaning of words. Because that's the reason why Siri originally says here some books on travel. Didn't understand what the word book means. And now just think of that, and now take that same concept for natural language processing and think about all the languages, all the slang expressions in all different countries around the world, and you can see that this is not an easy thing to do. But we see it all the time, right? We have Google Home, we have Alexa. I think it's just being launched from Amazon. It's just being launched here, which allows voice interactions. This is becoming a standard, and it's an important trend for us to watch. The idea of a knowledge graph also has to use the taxonomy and the ontology. But what it's basically doing is trying to fulfill this vision that was mentioned at least 15 years ago of the semantic web, of actually having meaning to words, so that when a search is done, and guess who uses knowledge graph? Number one user of knowledge graph is Google. That's how they do the search. They have developed meaning for words out there, and they're able to bring that in a very rapid fashion. But we do have some examples in the travel industry. S.A.S, who unfortunately fell ill, the gentleman from S.A.S, has a knowledge graph, and I suggest you check out his webpage and learn more about that. Now, chatbots. So I went to a VentureBeat conference last spring, and VentureBeat is basically an organization providing information to venture capitalists in the Valley. And they also try to follow trends. And so chatbots, everything was chat. The whole conference was around chatbots. And basically what they are, text-based services that let you do a certain task. And it's often a mixture of AI and human. And the better ones are actually a mixture of AI and human. They're good for simple tasks, but they're not really good for complex tasks. So will a chatbot, and there are many out there already for travel, will they replace travel agents? Will they replace your reservation platform as a hotel? Will they replace any interaction? I think that the answer to that is some. There's going to be some interaction, and it's going to be a certain segment of the population who likes that type of back and forth chatting. The only other aspect of this to keep in mind is the real success of these things is sitting on an overall chat platform. So if you're familiar with WeChat out of China, the amount of commerce that is being done on WeChat is phenomenal, including travel commerce. And Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, and Slack for corporations. These are all different existing messaging platforms that chatbots are being added. And the way that it's very interesting is from a payment perspective. So you're having a chat, whether it's pure computer or whether it's computer and human assistant, and then you say, buy. I want to buy. Well, guess what? Facebook has your buy information. You're done. And if you've ever tried to buy something on your mobile phone, and you had to enter in your credit card or at least your security code, it's not a pleasant experience. And that's where these bots, I think, are going to play a role. And I think we've seen it already. In fact, it's fair to say next couple of years, if not even sooner, we'll have hundreds of travel chatbots. If you want to see one in use, one of the presenters at the Phocuswright conference last year was a company called Mezi, M-E-Z-I. And they have some pretty good chatbots in it. You have more human-based, but then using AI in the background, a company called Lola, which was founded by one of the founders of Kayak, has some very interesting use of chat. So it's something you need to pay attention to. And then the idea of smart data. What is smart data? Well, we've heard big data. There's big data, and I mentioned earlier that there's lots of data out there. There's lots of structured data. There's lots of unstructured data. But at the end of the day, we don't care about that. We want smart data. We want something that's going to deliver and meet users' expectations. Because that's the end game here. Just think how you use your smartphone. what has it done to change your life? It makes you, it's amazing. We sit around at our dinner table and we have and we can answer that question quickly. We tried to not do too much cell phones or mobile phones, smartphones at the dinner table, but it's amazing that you now can answer any question. And my kids, who are not kids anymore, 20 and 24-year-old adults, they don't remember a time that they didn't have a device in their hand that they could just find that answer. But we need to get better. And AI is going to drive this so we're better, so that it's more relevant, and that it's contextually relevant. That contextually relevant, what do I do next, is one of the keys here. And it's not easy. So I want to talk just briefly about AI and the Internet of Things. So this Internet of Things, this is another example where we had technology and spin and hype just get us all riled up. So you ask somebody, what's the Internet of Things? Well, they might say it's a smart thermometer, or a thermostat, rather, in your home. Or it's a smart refrigerator. And the simple way of thinking about this is that we are entering a world where there's going to be sensors every place. So we're going to be in an environment which is not only connected via Wi-Fi or other networks, but there's going to be sensors every place. And those sensors are going to communicate. They're going to have actuators, which means they're going to trigger some type of action. They have storage. They work with devices. They process. They look at localization. They do identity. I do believe, and hopefully it'll be in my lifetime, we will have an airport experience where you'll actually walk in the airport and then you'll walk to your plane. That security will be seamless. And I've seen some examples where they've tried to do this because you're in this environment of the Internet of Things. But it cannot work by itself. And where AI comes in, a good example is facial recognition. That will be the new way that security will happen at the airport. It'll scan your face, and if it finds the wrong combination of your face and information, you're not going to be able to travel. But this idea of AI and human cannot be, I cannot kind of underemphasize this. I want to really emphasize this to the crowd. And this is where you have to think about it. And even, again, some of these pitches today talked about this idea, or all the buzz that Lola, that Paul English's company is generating, is all about this. And if you think about it, if you operate a tour operator, or you operate a travel agency, or operate a hotel, or any part of the ecosystem, you have a lot of knowledge out there. You have knowledge that is in the human brain of your employees. So the best use is find a way to implement AI to help share that knowledge across employees and make them smarter. Make them able to deliver more personalized service. So I want to just kind of close this with a basic theme, which I really like to emphasize when we talk about these subjects. Everyone thinks about technology. Technology is going to change everything. We're going to be in this era where technology doesn't make the change. Technology triggers and enables the change, which changes the business practice. There couldn't be an Uber if there wasn't a smartphone. There probably could not be an Airbnb if there wasn't a web. I mean, these are things that basically, whether it's a sharing economy, the wisdom of the crowd, the idea of a TripAdvisor, having all these reviews, that was using the technology in destination services, personalized travel services because of big data, and then AI leading to intelligent travel services. So let's just look at a subset of this first, and we'll get into the AI piece. So you look at enabling technologies as an example, because everyone has been talking about personalization for a long time. Another speaker, unfortunately, who got trapped in Edinburgh, who was supposed to be here today but couldn't because of the strike, is from BoxEver, David O'Flanagan, and he has a company that does big data that delivers personalization. Because you have this massive amount of data, you want smart data, you want unique insight, but what happens from the traveler's viewpoint? Once you start delivering personalized information, they're going to expect it. People use Netflix here. Use Netflix or anything like that? It's amazing. It starts knowing what you like. Here are some recommendations. And you don't even think about it anymore. It just happens. And that's another key thing about AI. When it becomes so common that you don't think about it, because that's using AI. When you don't think about it, or Amazon says, other people who bought this, product also like this product, or here's other things that people bought. So there is this kind of normalization of AI that happens. And when it comes to personalization, people are starting to expect it already. There's going to be behavior monitoring. Maybe, I know a lot of airlines I've talked to are waiting for the day to be able to know whether their passenger has entered the airport. Because it saves them so much money if they know. I mean, how often are we at the airport and they're making, that announcement that Mr. Jones is going to miss his flight because he's not here. So it's going to change things. But again, matching communication with context. There are standards like NDC, which we can do a whole different session on. But the point is, standards are trying to do upsell, cross-sell. When you look at smartphone preferences and beacons, beacons are devices that work on a frequency called Bluetooth that actually sit like in hotel lobbies, which then communicate with your smartphone, whether or not you have the app open. And it can automatically check you in. And there's a company, I think I saw them exhibiting here, called Kenichi, that won the Business Travel Innovate Award last year, where I'm a judge. And they use beacons in a hotel sense. But you have these stored preferences, and you have location-based. So let's go to the same type of discussion, but around AI and digital intelligence. So we talked about a lot of stuff today, machine learning and deep learning and natural language processing and blah, 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 blah. So let's talk about what it really means for the travel agency and the global travel community. This is voice to machine, right? We will have automated assistants. How many people here saw Philip Wolf's interview with Oliver from Google? You guys were not here? No, really? You should check out the video. It was a fantastic interview. And Google is putting together all these pieces that sound a lot like an automated assistant that's going to help you with travel. And we'll talk about that again in a moment. This idea of cognitive computing, even though it's a bit of a buzzword, but probably best example is the IBM Watson, which Terry Jones, who is the former founder of Travelocity and the former CIO of Sabre, is leading the effort. He's the chairman of Wavelaser, which is taking IBM's Watson and bringing that to the travel industry. But what happens is that suddenly generates intelligent recommendations, because you understand what the personal preferences of the individual are and what the content, understanding the content and matching those two together. We mentioned about machine learning, which it improves accuracy. What that means is perhaps automated reaccommodations. How many people had to do reaccommodations today? I won't ask for hands, but the strike has caused a lot of problems. It caused us to lose 2 panelists for today's session. But it wasn't exactly automated. But perhaps we'll get to the point where machine learning will help us and deep learning will help us with that. And then the unstructured data problem, what that means is that we're going to see more relevant information bubble up. The idea, if you do check out Mezi, this chatbot I mentioned, the thing that it does, it delivers 3 choices when you ask it a question. And it's using AI to do that. It's using machine learning and other techniques. But it's doing it in a way that is very sophisticated behind the scenes. And that's the bubbling up of relevance. So what's the true impact on our industry? It's first the interface, and we've talked about the interface quite a bit. It's the chatbot, it's the voice, it's the interaction with your environment through the Internet of Things. And that's going to change the way things go. The fact that there is a company who allows you to walk into a hotel lobby and be automatically checked in is the sign of the future. And every airline executive I've spoken to over the last at least 10 years, talks about this free-flowing, from the curb to the airport lounge maybe, and then onto the aircraft. Without human help, everything's all automated. Or in the corporate travel sense, people are talking about you don't have to fill out expense reports anymore. Everything's going to be automated. I, like everyone else, are very anxious for that day, but the beginning is already here. And then I think most important for everyone in this room is customer insight. All the kind of cliche phrases of you have to know your customer, and we're a customer-driven company. A customer is first. You need to use tools to understand your customer, and AI can help you do that and help you deliver smart data to the customer that's relevant, timely, and meaningful. I've been telling travel entities for a long time that the most important thing you need to do is think about that traveler after they've already booked your product and they're actually using the product. That's when you have the most influence. That's where you help. So I just wanted to end the talk with a diagram I created, I think it's about 3 years ago. And I've been actually talking about this concept for about 8 years, 9 years. I would have to check my blog when I first started talking about this. And it's this intelligent travel assistant. And the thing about an intelligent travel assistant that's important for you to keep in mind is why would it change the travel process? There's a new gatekeeper, a new person who is basically between you, not a person, but a new entity that's between you and your customer. And that's the OS providers, the smartphone providers like Google. And behind the scenes, you have a lot of the stuff that could be implemented today, such as AI bots that go out and find information. In fact, the idea of kind of a master bot and then having sub-bots do things. So let's say you go and ask Google as an intelligent assistant to do something. It may then go to an Expedia bot who does something and comes back. It doesn't have to do everything itself. But there are going to be recommendation engines. There's going to be natural language processing, specific understanding through taxonomy and ontology, machine learning. All that stuff is going to be there. There's going to be the Internet of Things interacting with people and location, beacons out in the environment. There's going to be understanding that we've never seen before from the cloud. There's going to be social media adding context and destination content. And then maybe preferences that are stored locally on your phone. You'll have a mobile wallet. You can do payments. You'll be able to do electronic itineraries to tie that all together. At some point, there's a booking process in the back end. And this is going to be basically in your pocket. So maybe it's a Siri for travel. Maybe it's a Google Now for travel. The most interesting thing is that when the audience was asked Oliver, was asked whether Google could be a competitor or can be a partner. Most of the audience was pretty friendly. They said, Google is going to be a partner. But they're a gatekeeper. And anyone between you and your customer, you got to be careful. And the thing about this, which could be really frightening and potentially damaging for the travel company, is if it's like Mezi and you get 3 choices are delivered, how do you get one of those choices to be yours? Right now, we're in this environment of search. Let's go out and search, and we have all these search results. I don't know how many of you go beyond the first page of Google. I maybe go to the 3rd page. I don't think I've gone beyond the 3rd page for a while. But that's changing as well. We're in this pull environment where an intelligent assistant is going to pull information on your behalf. And if you're a provider of travel services, you've got to be part of that. Thank you very much. So it's my pleasure to bring on stage someone who I've known for many decades. He's a colleague, he's a friend, and most of all, he's kind of my mentor, Philip Wolff.
Thank you, Noah.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Good to see you.
Certainly when we met we both had a lot of hair that wasn't gray, that's for sure. So let's get specific here so the audience says, wow, I really understand that. So machine learning. Give an example of machine learning in travel.
So the one that always pops to my mind is, I have some background in the corporate travel industry, is a booking tool that understands people who go to certain patterns, certain destinations, and what they do, and just automatically accommodating that person, even if I was a first-time traveler to that destination. It should be automatic.
So if I lived in Berlin and for business, I flew to Madrid a lot. And I've done that 6 times already.
Yes.
What would happen the 7th time?
You would just say, do what I did last time, and you'd be finished.
Okay.
And then if you're a new person, it would look at all the people who went between Berlin and Madrid and come up with recommendations that seem to be the most common based on the knowledge that you give it.
So I just want the audience to understand. In the old days, you could have created a profile with my trip or my Madrid trip. And you'd have to self-program it, populate. You'd have to say, I go from Berlin to Madrid. I like to leave at this time. I like to return at this time. This is how I like to get to the airport. This is the hotel I like, right? And with machine learning, you don't have to pre-populate anything. It learns by your behavior.
Yeah, but it needs the data, though. Again, it's not intelligent by itself. You need to feed it all the data. So feeding everyone's trips in there is a key for that. And the sister of that, the deep learning piece of that, I think will be most applicable for disruptions. I think if, rather than the traditional operational research kind of approach that they use at airports where it's, they really treat you as a thing more than a human being.
Yeah.
And they're moving you from here to there. It's a logistics problem. But I think that what really comes to bear here is what's the reason for my trip and incorporating into that and using that as a data point for maybe a deep learning solution.
I think that's why personalization, although it's been talked about a lot, why hasn't taken off until now, because in the old days, the traveler had to pre-instruct a system about what you like and what you want, whereas now it's learning itself.
The difference between explicit and implicit is key here. And I mean, you remember Euro Vacations way back when used a platform by a company called Broadvision. And it was just very tedious because in order to get it to be personalized, you basically explicitly had to say all these things. And people got really tired of checking these boxes.
And you talked about chatbots. So right now the popular ones is the customer, the user types something on a chat platform.
Yes.
And the computer answers. That's what chatbot is, right?
Yeah, though most of them have some level of human assistance.
Okay.
So, again, you look at Paul English's Lola.
Yeah.
That's really, actually, it's pure human assistant the way I understand it, but then the human is reacting to information that the computer using AI is providing them to try to make it more personalized. If you look at Mezi is actually returning an automated message to you to the point where it gets too complex for the machine to answer, and then it's hopefully seamlessly given off to a human being.
And then what do you call it? Voice-activated chatbots, where you talk to the chatbot instead of type. Right?
Well, it's more of just a voice interface. And I mean, I probably use voice. I use Google Voice for search now more than I type. It's just easier.
Yeah.
It just has to be smart enough to understand what you're saying.
So Oliver Heckman, the head of Google Travel, said 70% of all Google searches are on mobile now, and 20% of the 70% are initiated by
voice. Yeah.
So another example here is he talked about a real example of, say it was last early December, and you wanted to book your trip to ITB, and he said, when you're typing, you have to type in dates or whatever. But the systems now they're investing is, well, I want to go to ITB next year, or I want to go to ITB the second week of March, or I need to go to ITB before my brother's wedding.
That's right.
Right. So, like, these sound cool. Are companies really working on these, and when will this become reality?
There's no question that the idea of context, in other words, and that's why they call it conversational commerce. It's the idea of having a conversation that you don't have to say, oh, I mean Berlin, when you've already asked about hotels in Berlin, is already coming. There are examples of that at varying degrees of accuracy. Again, most of the voice stuff that's out in the marketplace is either based on Google or based on nuance.
Yeah.
So there's like a platform there that's improving, and then there are people building upon that in order to make it more travel specific.
So what's amazing, a takeaway for this audience, so you saw the early poll, and if you take away the 5% that were non-believers, about half said that artificial intelligence will alter many things in travel, and about half said it will fundamentally change travel. So what I try to do at ITB is give context. So when I met you and I started Phocuswright, most pundits, travel professionals, media, journalists, experts, I'm not talking about lay people, said online will not alter travel. They really believe this. And then it happens, right? And now, even if you answered back then, online would fundamentally change travel, it still would have been an understatement, right?
That's right.
And then we have, big data and Web 2.0 and apps. So there's a pattern where most people, pretty smart people, educated, well-read, immersed, experienced prior trends, when a new one comes, they pretty much put the brakes on, and then when it's time to go, it's either too late or too expensive to really have a competitive advantage. So what advice could you give with artificial intelligence? And maybe some people in the travel industry will say, you know what? I'm not going to get left behind this time. What do I do so I can at least have a level playing field or play?
So I would focus, number one, on your customer data. Understanding how can you understand your customer better. And you should have a single view of that customer, which may sound simple, but a lot of times I've worked with tour operators and other players in the industry, they don't have that single view. So you've got to kind of understand the total view of that customer. And then you try to use some techniques, hire some smart, you probably can't afford data scientists for the big data, but you can, there's a lot of open source tools that you can hire programmers to do.
So what's an example of a single view of a customer?
You have to try to understand.
When they call you?
Not just
when they email you? When they visit you?
Yeah,
it's
not
all
just
together.
Not only omni-point, so every point of contact, but also understand perhaps their social behavior if they're a Twitter user, or if you're able to see some of their Facebook activity. So the idea is to try to understand that customer better and understand their preferences, and then make sure your product is matching with those preferences. So it's a little bit of a kind of almost a back office plumbing thing.
Another single view example is if you have a customer that booked a similar trip 2 years in a row around the same time, a good company would proactively reach out to that customer and anticipating that instead of waiting to take an order.
And the other point I'd like to make in reference to this is that as much as the travel industry, I would say, was one of the drivers for online, I think in context of AI, what's being driven is other industries. There's other industries using AI, and the fact that Google has all these tools and pulling them together for a travel example is partially because they've used it in other examples as well, or they're just developing that. So I'm not saying, just to be clear, that you necessarily have to launch a chat bot, or that you necessarily have to experiment with voice. But you need to keep track of what's happening. Who's doing chatbots, how successful they are. Look at what Paul English is doing with Lola. Look at what Mezi is doing with chatbots, and be aware of it. So I think the way to prevent yourself from being left behind is just not to sit back and wait for it to come to you and wait for someone to say, here's a solution. Look at what's happening around you and then figure out what pieces make sense for your business.
So are you saying that it might be possible one day to walk up to a cash machine, stand there, not do anything, and it'll actually spit out cash?
Well, I told you that example. I met an entrepreneur at Plug and Play, which is a accelerator down in Silicon Valley, that actually, he has a company that does that. And it's through facial recognition and all these other AI techniques. And he has, in his lobby of his company, he has an ATM to demonstrate that.
So then it's reasonable to think you could board an airplane or check into a hotel or get into a car with the same way.
Absolutely. And I think that's going to come quicker. And we'll be talking about a little later this afternoon in another session that I'll be having a discussion with a gentleman from Sabre about personalization and dynamic pricing. I think we're going to see that enter this through the use of big data. So it will happen around you as well, driven by some of the suppliers and some of the other players, the OTAs and so forth.
Yeah. And the clients you work with, are they any examples of where they're embracing AI and machine learning and doing something interesting? Or?
I see it more in the startups than necessarily the mainstream folks. A lot of the mainstream folks are just trying to deal with whether their platform, their tour operator platform, is meeting the business requirements of the company, or whether the corporate travel entity needs to have an expense solution. Those more practical level things is what we work on in consulting. But when I'm dealing with the startups, and I deal with quite a few of them, we do see the chat out there. We see the machine learning making the application better. And so there's a number of up-and-coming players who I think will see.
Do you think there'll be a day where if you don't have some chat capability with your customers or prospects, it'll just hurt your business?
I really liked the response from Priceline when they were asked about why did they go with TripAdvisor Instant Booking versus Expedia, which finally did. They said they have to be every place the customer is. And that chat channel is a place where some customers will be. So yes, you're going to have a chat bot. But it is early. Don't sound the alarm that you're going to be out of business without a chatbot. It's more or less, let's monitor what some of these companies are doing and make sure we're ready to do something if it becomes a preferred channel.
There's also a misinterpretation. I remember in the 60s when I was young, my mother's brother lived in Mexico City, and you had to call the operator, give the phone number, and then we always did it around dinner, and then the operator would call you back when the call was completed. And I remember back then that I was talking about completing international phone calls yourself. And some people actually said back then that that wasn't good service, right? You were taking the human out. So I think there's in travel, there's a misinterpretation about great service. Great service is not the degree another human helps you or not. Some people interpret it that way, but rather how easy it is for the customer to get what he or she wants.
I think unfortunately we're in an impatient society. People want answers now. They want service now. They're not happy with anything that's not immediate. And so whether that's an electronic delivery or a human who has AI assisted, I think that's really the key.
I think a year from now we'll be able to do several sessions at ITB with lots of real examples and move to the next phase.
Hopefully we won't have a strike and we'll lose some of our presenters.
Ladies and gentlemen, Norm Rose, thank you very much.
Thank you a lot.
We did it.